In the far reaches of the Andromeda expanse, where stars burned in slow, ancient rhythms and nebulae painted the void in swirls of violet and gold, humanity had finally found its place among the stars, not as conquerors, but as allies. The United Stellar Accord was a fragile miracle, stitched together from a dozen alien species and one stubborn human race that refused to stay planet-bound. At the heart of this alliance stood Nova Station, floating like a silver jewel between two colliding galaxies, a massive orbital hub where diplomacy hummed alongside plasma engines and artificial gravity fields. It was here, amid the clatter of maintenance drones and the soft chime of translation implants syncing across languages, that Corporal Theo Rennick first learned he'd been assigned a partner. The news came not through official channels or formal briefing, but via a clipped message flashing on his wrist display during breakfast. Asterisk effective immediately, you are paired with ZYX-114 for joint patrol duties. Report to Sector Gamma at 0800. Asterisk that was it. No explanation. No context. Just a name or what passed for one. That sounded more like a malfunctioning airlock than a living being. Theo stared at the words while chewing a mouthful of reconstituted egg substitute that tasted suspiciously like regret. He blinked. ZYX-114? He muttered, wiping synthetic yolk from the corner of his lip. Around him, other soldiers laughed and joked with their partners. Humans with humans, Valnorians with their own kind. Even the gelatinous quarrel had been matched with another of their pulsating species. Everyone, it seemed, had gotten someone normal, someone familiar. And then there was him. When he arrived at Sector Gamma, still grumbling under his breath about random assignments and someone's idea of a joke, he saw her before she turned around. She stood near the observation deck window, tall and lean, her back straight as a laser beam. Her skin was a deep, shimmering purple, like twilight caught in liquid amethyst, and her hair, long and flowing, was pure white, almost glowing under the station's soft lighting, like strands of moonlight spun into silk. She wore a modified version of the standard Accord uniform, tailored to fit her alien frame. High collar, reinforced shoulders, and boots that looked capable of crushing rocks. But it was her posture that caught Theo off guard. Not rigid, not aggressive, but alert, like a predator who didn't need to show teeth to be feared. She turned slowly, and Theo nearly dropped his datapad. Her eyes were large, almond-shaped, and an unsettling shade of gold, like molten metal poured into glass. They locked onto him with unnerving precision, scanning, assessing. Then she smiled. Or at least, something resembling a smile touched the corners of her lips. More like a twitch, really, as if her face wasn't used to the expression. "Corporal Rennick," she said, her voice smooth but layered with a strange harmonic echo, as though two people were speaking at once. "I have reviewed your service record. You are adequate." Theo blinked. Thanks. "You were involved in the Tethys incident," she continued, stepping closer. "You disobeyed direct orders to extract wounded civilians from a collapsing biodome. Risked your life. Twice." "That was just doing my job," Theo said, shifting uncomfortably. He hated when people brought up Tethys. It hadn't felt heroic at the time, just necessary. "Your file also states you once punched a superior officer during training simulations." "He called me a coward because I hesitated to fire on a civilian drone," Theo shot back. It looked like a kid's toy. ZYX-114 tilted her head slightly, a gesture that made her white hair shift like water. Interesting. Emotional response outweighed protocol. Unpredictable. Dangerous. "And yet here we are," Theo said, forcing a grin. "Guess they wanted to pair troublemakers together." "I am not a troublemaker," she replied flatly. "I follow orders. With precision, unless logic dictates otherwise. Right? So you're saying you're smart enough to break rules only when you're sure you're right." "Exactly." Theo exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. This was going to be a long assignment. Later that day, after a painfully awkward orientation session where the translator implants struggled to keep up with ZYX-114's native tongue, a series of clicks, hums, and subsonic vibrations, the two were sent on their first joint patrol through the lower maintenance tunnels of Nova Station. These corridors were rarely traveled, dimly lit, and filled with the constant thrum of coolant pipes and ventilation systems. Dust floated in lazy spirals through beams of emergency lighting, and shadows clung to every corner like secrets. Theo walked ahead, rifle slung over his shoulder, trying to maintain a casual pace while constantly glancing back at his partner. ZYX-114 moved silently, her bare feet making no sound against the metal grates despite her height and obvious strength. Her senses, Theo had read in her file, were hyperacute. She could detect heat signatures through walls, hear heartbeats from 10 meters away, and see across multiple light spectrums. She didn't need a flashlight. She didn't need much of anything, apparently. So, Theo began, breaking the silence. Do you have a real name? Or are we stuck with Zyra 114 forever? She didn't look at him. That is my designation. Yeah, but don't your people have names? Like, personal ones? We do, but I have not earned one yet. Theo frowned. Earned? What does that mean? In my culture, she said, pausing briefly to scan a junction ahead with a flick of her wrist-mounted sensor. A true name is granted only after an individual completes a trial of purpose. Until then, we are known by function and rank. And you haven't completed yours? No. My trial was interrupted when I was selected for the Accord Exchange program. My people believed cooperation with lesser species would provide valuable data. Lesser species? Theo raised an eyebrow. So you think we're inferior? Zyra 114 stopped walking and turned to face him fully. Her golden eyes narrowed slightly. I did. Now I am uncertain. You act illogically, emotionally, but you also risk yourself for others without gain. That is unusual. Well, thanks, I guess, Theo said, scratching his cheek. So if you don't have a name, can I call you something? Something easier than Zyra? You may attempt it. How about Zyra? She considered it. It has no meaning in my language. Exactly. It's new, fresh, like a fresh start. She stared at him for a long moment. Then, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. Zyra. Acceptable. Theo grinned. Welcome to Earth naming rights, partner. Their first few days together were a mess of miscommunication, cultural misunderstandings, and near disasters narrowly avoided. Once, Theo accidentally insulted her by offering her food from his ration pack. Apparently, sharing meals among her species was a sacred ritual reserved for bonded kin, and doing it casually was akin to proposing marriage. Zyra froze, her entire body going rigid, her skin darkening slightly in what Theo later learned was a sign of extreme embarrassment. He spent the next hour stammering apologies while she refused to make eye contact. Another time, during a weapons drill, Zyra dismantled a plasma rifle in under 12 seconds, reassembled it blindfolded, and then fired 3 perfect shots through a moving target while balancing on one foot. Theo, impressed, clapped. She looked horrified. Why did you applaud? That was basic proficiency. It's called encouragement, Theo said. We humans like to cheer when someone does something cool. That is inefficient. Noise does not improve performance. Maybe not, Theo said with a shrug. But it makes us feel good. Zyra tilted her head again, studying him like he was a puzzle she couldn't solve. Despite the friction, something began to shift. Not quickly, not dramatically, but like tectonic plates grinding beneath the surface, slow and inevitable. During a midnight watch shift, when most of the station slept and the stars blazed outside the main viewport, Theo found Zyra standing alone in Observation Bay 7, staring into the endless dark. You're supposed to be resting, he said, leaning against the doorway. I do not require sleep the way you do, she replied. My nervous system enters low-power mode for short intervals. Otherwise, I remain alert. Must be exhausting. It is efficient. Theo stepped inside, joining her at the glass. For a while, they said nothing. Then, softly, he asked, What are you looking for out there? My home, she said. Not literally. It is too far. But sometimes, I search for stars that match the alignment of my birth cluster. A memory. Nothing more. Theo nodded. I get that. When I was deployed to Mars base, I used to look up and find Orion. Same one we see from Earth. Felt like a piece of home. Zyra turned to him. You miss your world. Every day, Theo admitted. Even the dumb stuff. Rain. Real coffee. Dogs barking at nothing. Here everything's so controlled. Clean. Sometimes I forget what it feels like to be messy. You know? She studied his face. You are messy. Emotionally. Behaviorally. But you are not broken. Theo laughed. High praise. It is observation. They stood together in silence. Two beings from opposite ends of existence, united only by duty and the quiet ache of homesickness. Then the alarms blared. Red lights flashed. Klaxons screamed. Emergency protocols scrolled across every screen. Unauthorized energy surge detected in reactor core delta. Containment breach possible. All personnel to battle stations. Theo snapped to attention. "Come on!" he shouted, already sprinting down the corridor. Zyra followed, silent and swift as a shadow. By the time they reached the reactor level, chaos had taken hold. Engineers scrambled, shouting over comms, while automated drones tried and failed to stabilize the core's fluctuating output. The central chamber pulsed with erratic blue light, and the air crackled with static. A containment failure here could wipe out half the station. "What happened?" Theo demanded, grabbing a technician by the arm. "Unknown. The core started overloading on its own. Safety protocols won't engage." Zyra pushed forward, bypassing human guards with calm authority. She placed both hands on the control panel, closing her eyes. Her fingers danced across the interface faster than any human could follow, her mind processing data streams in real time. "There is an intrusion," she said sharply. "Not mechanical, digital. A worm virus embedded in the thermal regulation code. It's mimicking system feedback." "Can you stop it?" Theo asked. "If I override primary command, yes. But it will require manual shutdown of auxiliary power. Someone must enter the core chamber." "That's suicide," the technician cried. "Radiation levels are already critical." "The shielding will hold for 127 seconds, Zyra said. "Enough time." "You're not going in there alone," Theo said, already pulling on a radiation suit. "You lack the physiological resilience," Zyra argued. "Your cells will degrade within minutes. So will yours." "No, my species evolved under high radiation conditions. I can endure longer, but I cannot operate the override manually and manage the firewall simultaneously. I need you at the console." Theo hesitated. He hated this, hated being the one left behind. But he nodded. "Do it. I'll hold the line." Zyra didn't respond. She simply removed her uniform jacket, revealing intricate bioluminescent patterns beneath her skin, veins of soft light that pulsed with her heartbeat. Then, without hesitation, she stepped into the decontamination chamber and vanished into the reactor core. Inside, the world was fire and noise. The air shimmered with ionized particles, and gravity fluctuated unpredictably. Zyra moved through the storm like a dancer, her body adapting, her mind focused. She reached the central override node, pried open the casing with her bare hands, and began rewiring the failsafe systems. Alarms shrieked. Warnings flashed in 6 languages. Her vision blurred. Her skin began to blister, but she kept working. Outside, Theo's fingers flew across the console, guided by Zyra's calm, steady voice in his earpiece. "Left terminal. Red wire. Disconnect. Now, reroute to secondary buffer. Confirm." "Done," Theo shouted. Sweat poured down his face. His heart pounded like a war drum. "Initiate firewall purge. Code sequence. Theta 9 Zulu." He typed furiously. "Purging." The system stuttered. Then, slowly, the core's pulse stabilized. The blue light softened. Warning indicators blinked from red to amber. "She's done it," someone yelled. "Containment restored." But Theo didn't celebrate. He watched the timer. 127 seconds had passed. Zyra hadn't come out. "Zyra!" he shouted into the comms. "Zyra? Do you copy?" Silence. Without thinking, he ripped off his headset, slammed his palm on the emergency release, and charged into the chamber. Radiation alarms screamed. His suit's integrity warning flashed red. Pain lanced through his body like needles, but he pushed forward, following the faint glow of her bioluminescence. He found her collapsed beside the core node, her breathing shallow, her skin scorched in places, her white hair matted with coolant fluid. "Hey!" Theo whispered, kneeling beside her. "You did it. You crazy, brilliant alien. You did it." Her eyes fluttered open. "You shouldn't be here." "Yeah, well, neither should you," he said, trying to smile. "But here we are." He dragged her out, ignoring the agony in his bones, ignoring the medics screaming at him to stop. Together, they collapsed just outside the blast door as it sealed shut behind them. Later, in the medical bay, both wrapped in Regan sheets that hummed with healing energy, Theo woke to find Zyra watching him. "You broke protocol," she said. "So did you," he croaked. "Saving the station? Not exactly standard procedure. You risked your life for me. You did the same for all of us." She was quiet for a long time. Then, softly, she said, "Back on your ship, when you asked why you were paired with me. Do you remember what the commander said?" Theo nodded. Because you both are special. He was correct. Theo snorted. I thought he was just blowing smoke. No, he understood. The Accord doesn't assign partners randomly. They analyze behavioral patterns, psychological profiles, combat instincts. They look for balance, for synergy. And we've got that? You act without thinking. I think without acting. You bring emotion. I bring logic. Together we compensate. Theo grinned weakly. So we're like a weird space yin and yang? If that means we are opposites that create harmony, then yes. He chuckled, then winced. Ow, laughing hurts. You should rest. So should you. Neither moved. Days passed. Recovery was slow. Theo suffered minor radiation burns and temporary neural fatigue. Zyra healed faster, but the damage had been severe. Even her resilient biology needed time. Still, she visited him daily, bringing strange nutrient gels from her homeworld that tasted like burnt cinnamon but supposedly accelerated healing. One evening, as the station drifted through a field of stellar dust that glittered like diamond sand, Theo found Zyra in the hydroponics garden, touching the leaves of a blue orchid with delicate reverence. These plants, she said, they grow without purpose, no defense, no strategy, yet they survive. Beauty's a purpose, Theo said, limping over. Sometimes just existing is enough. She looked at him. You say strange things, but true, right? She didn't answer. Instead, she reached into a small pouch and pulled out a thin crystal pendant, carved with swirling glyphs. This is from my world. Contains a fragment of my ancestral data stream. A memory of my mother's voice. Theo stared. You're giving this to me? Not giving, she corrected. Sharing. Among my people, this is how trust begins. Not through words. Through exchange. He took it gently, feeling the warmth of the crystal in his palm. Thank you, Zyra. She nodded. And thank you, Theo, for not leaving me behind. They stood together, two mismatched souls in a universe too vast to comprehend, bound now by something deeper than duty, by respect, by courage, by the quiet understanding that sometimes the most extraordinary partnerships begin with the most unlikely pairings. Weeks later, when a distress signal came from a derelict vessel drifting near the edge of Accord space, a ship flagged with old war codes and suspected pirate activity. Command assigned Theo and Zyra to investigate. As they suited up for the mission, standing side by side in the launch bay, helmets in hand, Theo glanced at his partner. You ready for this, Zyra? She adjusted her gauntlets, her golden eyes gleaming with focus. As long as you do not do anything foolish. Me? Foolish? Theo feigned offense. I'm the picture of caution. She gave him that almost smile again. Prove it. The airlock hissed open. Beyond, the silent ship hung in the void, dark and waiting. Together, they stepped into the unknown. The derelict vessel, designated Echo 7, hung in the void like a forgotten tombstone. Its hull was scarred by micrometeorite impacts and something else. Deep, jagged gashes that looked less like natural damage and more like claw marks from some colossal beast. No lights flickered along its surface. No energy signatures pulsed from within. It was dead, or so it seemed. But the distress signal had been real. Repeating on an old Earth frequency, looping the same 5 words over and over. Don't let them take the core. Theo adjusted his helmet seal one last time, feeling the familiar pressure against his temples as the suit systems came online. Beside him, Zyra stood motionless, her white hair braided tightly back, her purple skin glowing faintly under the launch bay's sterile lighting. She didn't fidget, didn't pace, just watched the drifting ship with those golden eyes, unblinking. You think it's a trap? Theo asked, voice muffled through the comms. I think, Zyra replied, that anything capable of sending a distress call while appearing completely inert is either very clever or already dead. Comforting. It is accurate. They boarded via magnetic grapples, floating across the vacuum gap and landing with soft thuds on the outer hull. The airlock was fused shut, but Zyra ran a scanner over the mechanism and quickly located a secondary manual release buried beneath layers of rusted plating. With a grunt and a surge of strength that surprised even Theo, she pried it open. Inside, darkness swallowed them whole. Gravity flickered, half-standard, then none at all, then double for a terrifying second before stabilizing. Emergency lights blinked erratically, casting long, dancing shadows down narrow corridors lined with broken consoles and scattered debris. The air was stale, thick with the scent of burnt wiring and something organic, something rotting. Theo swept his rifle light across the walls. Scratches. Deep ones. Not random. Patterns. Symbols. Some looked like warnings. Others prayers. This wasn't just a ship, he whispered. It was a prison. Zyra knelt, running her fingers over a mark near the floor. These symbols are not human. Not any known Accord language either. But the structure, it's ceremonial. A binding ritual. Binding what? She didn't answer. Instead, she turned her head slightly, listening. There's movement below deck. Faint. Rhythmic. Like breathing. Could be machinery. No. Biological. Slow heartbeat. Large organism. Theo swallowed. So we're not alone. We never are, she said, rising smoothly to her feet. But now we know we are being watched. They moved deeper, weapons ready, every footstep echoing like a hammer strike in the silence. The deeper they went, the stranger the ship became. Walls pulsed faintly, as if lined with living tissue. Pipes oozed a viscous black fluid that retracted when light touched it. And the air grew heavier, pressing against their helmets like invisible hands. Then they found the core chamber. It wasn't what they expected. No reactor, no power source. Instead, suspended in a web of glowing filaments, floated a single object. A smooth obsidian sphere, no larger than a human head, humming with a low, subsonic vibration that made Theo's teeth ache. Around it, the floor was littered with bones. Some human, some not, all arranged in a perfect circle. And in the center, chained to the wall with thick biometal cuffs, sat a man, or what was left of one. His body was emaciated, wrapped in tattered flight gear. His skin pale and veined with dark threads that pulsed in time with the sphere. His eyes snapped open as they entered, wide, bloodshot, filled with terror and something else. Recognition. You're from Nova Station, he rasped, voice cracking through the comms. You have to destroy it. You have to. Zyra stepped forward. Identify yourself. Lieutenant Corvin Vale, he gasped. Survivor of the Auriga Initiative. We were studying this thing, the Void Seed. Thought it was dormant. Thought it was knowledge. But it's alive. It dreams. And when it dreams, it pulls things through. Theo glanced at the sphere. Pulls what through? Entities. Vale whispered. Things from outside. From between the stars. It used us. Fed on our fear. Took my crew one by one. Now it's waking up. Zyra approached the sphere slowly, scanner raised. It's emitting a quantum resonance field. Low level but expanding. If it reaches critical mass, it could open a rift. A rift to where? Theo asked. Somewhere, Zyra said simply. Somewhere that should not exist. Vale coughed violently. Only way to stop it is to sever the neural link. But it's bonded to me. My mind. It's part of the circuit now. Theo looked at Zyra. Can we cut the filaments? Disable it? The connections are biosynaptic, she said. Cutting them would trigger a feedback surge. Likely fatal to everyone on board, and possibly enough energy to ignite the rift anyway. So what do we do? Zyra turned to Vale. Is there a shutdown sequence? A code? Anything? The lieutenant shook his head weakly. Only sacrifice stops it. Someone has to take my place. Let it bond to a new host. Then, destroy both body and sphere together. Silence fell. Theo felt his stomach drop. You're saying someone has to volunteer to get infected? Just to blow it up? Yes, Vale said. I'm too weak. I can't do it again. But if someone's strong, someone with willpower. No, Theo said immediately. Absolutely not. We're getting you out of here. All of us. Zyra remained still, calculating. There may be another way. What? If the bond is synaptic, then perhaps it can be disrupted, not broken but overloaded. Flood the connection with conflicting signals. Disorient the seed long enough to remove it. How? Theo asked. By linking to it temporarily, voluntarily. But only someone with high neural resilience and emotional stability could survive even a few seconds. Theo stared at her. You're not thinking what I think you're thinking. I am. No. No way. That thing eats minds for breakfast. You go in there, you might not come out. I have trained for psychic resistance, Zyra said calmly. My people endured centuries of mental warfare. I can withstand intrusion. And if you're wrong, then you destroy the sphere, while I am linked, before the rift opens. Theo clenched his fists. I'm not letting you do this. You don't have a choice, she said. stepping toward the sphere. This is duty. This is purpose. Screw duty, Theo snapped. We're past that. You're not just some mission objective, Zyra. You're... He stopped himself. She turned to look at him. I'm what? She asked softly. Theo hesitated. The words stuck in his throat, tangled with fear and something warmer. Something he hadn't allowed himself to name. He thought of her standing in the observation bay, searching for home. Of her handing him the crystal pendant. Of her dragging herself out of a radiation storm just to save a station full of strangers. He thought of her calling him partner. I'm not losing you, he said finally, voice breaking. Not like this. Zyra studied him. Then, unexpectedly, she reached out and placed a hand on his armored shoulder. Her touch was firm, grounding. You won't, she said, because I will return. I promise. And before he could argue, she stepped into the web of filaments. The moment her skin touched the strands, they latched onto her like serpents, wrapping around her arms, her neck, slithering toward her temples. She didn't scream, didn't flinch, but her body tensed, her golden eyes rolling back as the connection took hold. Inside her mind, the world exploded. She was no longer on the ship. She was everywhere, floating in a vast, starless void. Voices whispered in languages older than time, screaming, begging, laughing. Shapes moved in the dark. Things with too many eyes, too many limbs, things that slithered between dimensions. And at the center of it all, a presence, cold, ancient, hungry. You are small, it said without speaking. Fleshbound, temporary. Why do you resist? Join the dream. Become eternal. Zyra clenched her mental defenses. I am Zyra of the seventh clutch. I serve the Accord. I protect life. You are not welcome here. The seed laughed. A sound like cracking ice. You fight because you care. That is your weakness. Emotion is vulnerability. It is also strength, she shot back. Because I choose to protect. Because I have someone waiting for me. Images flashed, Theo's smile. His hand reaching for hers. The warmth of the crystal pendant against his chest. The seed recoiled, as if burned. Outside, Theo watched in horror as Zyra's body convulsed. Her bioluminescent veins blazing bright white, then flickering dangerously. The sphere pulsed faster, the hum rising to a shriek. Cracks began to form in the walls. The air shimmered. Zyra! Theo shouted. How long do I wait? No response. He checked the timer on his suit. 10 seconds of overload. 15. 20. Any longer, and the rift might tear open. 30 seconds. Her breathing stopped. 40. Theo raised his plasma rifle, aiming at the sphere. Tears blurred his vision. At 47 seconds, Zyra's eyes snapped open. And she screamed, not in pain, in defiance. The filaments burst apart like overtension wires. The sphere cracked down the middle, its hum cutting off abruptly. Zyra collapsed to the floor, gasping, her body trembling, her skin pale and drained of color. Theo rushed to her, ripping off his helmet and pulling her into his arms. Zyra! Zyra, talk to me. She coughed, then managed a weak smile. Told you, I'd come back. He laughed. A shaky, breathless sound. You idiot. You absolute alien lunatic. She leaned into him, exhausted. Worth it. Behind them, Vale groaned. It's done. The link is broken. The seed is dead. Theo helped Zyra to her feet, supporting her weight as they stumbled back through the dying ship. Behind them, Echo 7 groaned like a dying beast, its unnatural biology collapsing in on itself. They barely made it to the escape pod before the hull imploded, vanishing into a silent burst of dark energy that rippled outward and dissipated like smoke. Back on Nova Station, Zyra spent 3 days in medical isolation, monitored for psychic contamination. Theo visited every hour, bringing terrible station coffee and even worse jokes. On the 4th day, she was released. They stood together on Observation Bay 7 once more, looking out at the endless stars. You know, Theo said, hands in his pockets, I've been thinking. You said you haven't earned your true name yet, but I think you have. She turned to him. How? You faced something beyond understanding. You fought for people who aren't even your own. You risked everything for duty, for honor, and for me. He met her gaze. That's not just a trial. That's a legend. Zyra was quiet for a long moment. Then, softly, she said, if I were to choose a name, I would want it to mean, the one who returns. Theo smiled. Then I'll call you that. Amara. She tested the word. Nodded. Yes, that feels right. Welcome home, Amara, he said. She didn't answer with words. Instead, she reached for his hand. And for the first time she held it, tight like she never planned to let go. The universe was vast, dangerous, unknowable. But in that moment, standing side by side, two mismatched souls from distant worlds, they had found something rare. Not just trust, not just respect, but something that felt, against all odds, like the beginning of forever. Years passed like drifting comets, bright, fleeting, and full of wonder. Theo and Amara didn't just survive the stars, they shaped them. Their mission aboard Echo 7 became legend, taught in Accord academies as a case study in cross-species cooperation and courage under psychic threat. Statues were never built in their honor, both would have laughed at the idea, but their names were whispered with respect in corridors from Nova Station to the Outer Rim colonies. They stayed partners, not just on duty but in life. It started quietly, a shared meal that lasted too long, a touch that lingered, a laugh exchanged in the middle of a firefight that somehow meant more than any grand speech ever could. And then one day, during a rare shore leave on the human colony world of New Haven, a planet with real rain, real trees, and skies that turned gold at sunset, Theo took her hand beneath a canopy of blooming sky vines and said, I don't care if your people don't do marriage. I want the universe to know you're mine. Amara tilted her head, the old gesture, the one he loved, and said, Then let us make our own tradition. Their wedding wasn't large, just a small gathering under the twin moons. A few comrades, a Velnorian priest who spoke 7 languages fluently, and a choral who sang a harmonic hymn so beautiful it made Theo cry, though he'd later insist it was allergies. She wore a dress woven from star silk gifted by her people, shimmering with soft purple hues that shifted like her skin. He wore his dress uniform, slightly altered, with a white sash woven with alien glyphs that translated to asterisk, bound not by blood, but by choice. Asterisk. When the officiant asked if they took each other for life, Amara didn't hesitate. I do, she said, her voice steady. Across galaxies, across time, even if my body fails and my mind fades, I will find you again. Theo grinned through tears. Same. Even if I have to chase you through every dimension in existence. They kissed softly, sweetly, and somewhere, deep in the fabric of space, it felt like the stars leaned in to watch. Life after that was ordinary. Beautifully, wonderfully ordinary. They retired to a quiet valley on New Haven, where hills rolled like waves and rivers sang over smooth stones. They built a home together, half human design, half alien architecture. Curved walls that glowed at night, open-air chambers that responded to thought, and a garden where earth roses grew beside bioluminescent vines from Amara's homeworld. And then came the children. Not right away. First, there were questions. Could a human and an alien even have offspring? The scientists said it was nearly impossible. Different biology, different DNA structures, entirely separate evolutionary paths. But nature, it seemed, had a sense of humor. 5 years after their wedding, Amara discovered she was pregnant. The Accord medical team practically moved into their house. Monitors blinked day and night. Geneticists held emergency summits. No one knew what to expect. When their first child was born, a daughter with lavender-tinted skin, snow-white hair, and golden eyes that sparkled with mischief, the entire station sent congratulatory messages. She cried like a human infant, laughed like sunlight breaking through clouds, and by 6 months old, could detect infrared light with her bare eyes. They named her Lyra. She was followed by 2 more. Kalen, a boy with Theo's stubborn grin and his mother's quiet intensity, and little Mira, whose laughter could calm storms and who somehow inherited both species' ability to go days without sleep. Their home buzzed with life. Toys scattered across glowing floors. Tiny feet pattered down the hall. Arguments erupted over bedtime, dessert, and who got to pilot the family hoverglider. Spoiler, it was always Mira, because she used her big golden eyes like weapons. Theo taught them how to build fires, tell stories, and identify constellations. Amara taught them mental discipline, stealth movement, and how to listen to the silence between sounds. Together, they taught them kindness, courage, and the value of standing up for those who couldn't.